This is Apple's brand new $599 entry-level MacBook, the MacBook Neo. And today we're going to be unboxing it, we're going to set it up, and we're going to compare it to the MacBook Air and just give you my overall first impressions of this machine because there's a lot of confusion out there and I hope to clear up all of it in this video. So this comes in 4 colors and today we'll be unboxing 2 of the most popular colors for the MacBook Neo, hands down, and that is going to be the citrus color and the blush color. So we're going to start with the citrus color, which I personally think will be the most popular color, even though blush is going to be probably a close second behind it. So you can see the color right here. It's kind of like a yellowish, greenish color. We'll see how that actually looks. On the side, we do have MacBook Neo, and then on the back, you can see the specs. So I did actually pay the extra $100 for the 512 gigs of storage and the Touch ID button. So double the storage and Touch ID, I think is worth $100 if you're not trying to spend as little as possible. So let's go ahead and unbox this. By the way, this is the base model over here, the 256 without the Touch ID. So we will be comparing that. So you can see we have our peel tabs right here as expected, one on the top, one on the bottom. So here we go. Here is our first look at the MacBook Neo, and wow, you can see the difference in color there from the box. So of course, like always with Apple, it is a little bit more saturated than what you'll actually see on the MacBook. You know, what you see on the box is more saturated, but let's go ahead and see how this looks. So we're gonna take this out of the box. Let's take a look at what else is in the box before we move on to the MacBook itself. And wow, this is the lightest I've ever felt a pamphlet inside of a MacBook before. So there must be only one sheet of paper in here. Yes, there's one little booklet here with 1 page, or I guess technically 2 pages right there. That's all you'll see. And you can see it is actually color matching there as well. Inside, we do have a braided USB-C to USB-C cable because we do not have MagSafe on this MacBook Neo. So you will have to charge with one of these, one of the 2 ports on there you will have to use for charging, which is unfortunate. And then also inside, we have a 20-watt charger. Now take a look at this packaging right here. So I believe this is the first time I've ever seen Apple put the Mac Hello font right there on the paper that you peel off of the MacBook when it's new. So this is actually that same citrus color. So I'm assuming this will also be color matched. We will check when we unbox the blush. But let's go ahead and take this paper off and get our first look at this citrus color. Oh man, I like this color a lot. So first impressions from just picking it up are that it feels just like the MacBook Air. Everything about this feels just like the MacBook Air. The construction, the weight. Fun fact, this is the exact same weight as the MacBook Air. So it's a slightly smaller display because of the bezels, but it feels the same. And man, this construction is amazing. This does not feel like a budget laptop. This feels super premium, and we can see on the corners here. So over on this side, we do have our 2 USB-C ports, and keep in mind we have one USB 3 port and one USB 2 port. So there is going to be a big difference in transfer speeds between those 2. So you do want to make sure that you use the USB 3 port for anything besides charging. So I'd use the USB 2 port for charging, USB 3 port for any type of hard drive or SSD that you have connected where you need fast transfer speeds. And then also take a look right here. So we do have the headphone jack all the way down here on the bottom next to these new side firing speakers. So the first time on a MacBook, we have side firing speakers. So I will be testing those and kind of comparing that to the MacBook Air to see which one sounds better. I'm assuming the MacBook Air will sound better. You can see kind of how those look. It's a really neat look. Now we're going to set this over to the side. You can kind of see how it looks in this bright lighting. So I moved it closer to my light and you can kind of see the different shades of this citrus color. So it will kind of change its shape based on the lighting that you have it in. So it's more of like I'd say it's more of like a green when you're in low light, and when it's in bright lights like that, it's more of a yellow. But I want to see how the pink compares to the citrus. So we are going to unbox the pink one now. So you can see on the sides, once again, we do have MacBook Neo in pink or blush. And you can see on the back that this is the base model. So this is the $599 one. The citrus is technically the $699 MacBook Neo because it has 512 of storage and Touch ID. But all of them have 8 gigs of RAM. You cannot configure that. So let's go ahead and peel these off. I wish these peel tabs were color coordinated instead of being green, but let's go ahead and take these off and take a look inside at the blush. So I think this one is going to be very, very popular, especially for women out there. Of course, men are going to buy it as well, but I think women are going to really really gravitate towards this blush pink color. And you can see the hello sign on there. It is color match. So it has kind of a blush tone to it. And let's go ahead and peel the paper off of this one. And man, yeah, this is a nice color as well. So this is the blush. It's very faint. You can see when I turn it over here, it is a very faint pink color, but you can definitely tell it's pink. I guess if you put it really in bright lighting, it can kind of look silver, but you could tell from the Apple logo especially that this is absolutely a pink color, which I think a lot of people are going to be pleased with. So let's go ahead and open up both of these, and you can actually open up the MacBook Neo with just one finger. So we're going to pull up with one finger and we can see what both of these look like. So we'll take that paper off, take a look at the keyboard on these. So we have a matching, keyboard. The keys have a tint of the color that you choose. So you can see on here we have kind of a citrus look to the keys on the keyboard, and same with the blush. You can kind of see a pink tone on the keys, and all the keys are white, so they're light colored, which is also really nice. And you can see the wallpaper on here is already pre-installed, and it is color matching to the color that you receive. So let's put the pink up because I want to focus on citrus, which is my personal favorite color. Now we do also have, like I said, we do also have indigo and silver, but I think this is going to be one of the most popular options to choose from. So take a look at this. My first impressions are that the keyboard and the trackpad do feel similar to the MacBook Air, but it does seem like this is a little bit smaller. Let me pull my MacBook Air over here. So here is the MacBook Air, and you can see the differences pretty much right away. So like I said before, we did have a black keyboard, so the keys were black, but now they have that lighter shade right here that's color matching to the color that you choose, which is really nice. And then the trackpad is where you'll see the biggest difference between these two in terms of design, aside from the keys, of course. The trackpad is not only larger on the MacBook Air, which by the way, this is the 13-inch MacBook Air. So even the 13 inches, even though these are both the same 13 inches, this MacBook Air is not only taller in terms of the screen actually goes up higher than the MacBook Neo, but also just the overall keyboard and everything here just feels larger. So everything on the MacBook Neo feels a little bit more compact, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's something I noticed right away. And then the trackpad itself is where you'll feel a difference, because if you click down, you can see that it's physically moving down here. And the reason I say that is because with the MacBook Air, and pretty much every MacBook as of late has a force touch trackpad, which means that it's not actually a mechanical moving trackpad. When you click down on it, the haptic feedback in the trackpad here makes it feel like you're clicking, and it feels a bit more tactile, whereas that's a real mechanical trackpad here with multi-touch. So you still have the gestures and everything, but just know that this is something that might fail a little bit sooner than something like you'd see on the MacBook Air. And as far as the bezels go, the bezels actually aren't too bad on the MacBook Neo. So I thought they'd be a lot chunkier in person than they actually are. Now this bottom part right here is probably what bothers me the most. So it sticks out the most, I would say, from this little bottom section right here. It doesn't look as modern as like the MacBook Air does. So maybe the bottom bezels bother me more than the top, because the top bezels do allow us to get rid of the notch. So there's no notch on the MacBook Neo because of these thicker bezels. But it's definitely a smaller screen because it's 13 inches exactly versus 13.6 on the 13-inch MacBook Air. So you'll feel that difference right away. Like, it makes the MacBook Air 13-inch look a little bit large, which is kind of crazy. Anyways, we'll compare it more to the MacBook Air in a little bit, but let's go ahead through the setup for this MacBook Neo. Okay, so we start off with the language. We're going to select our language of English. We're going to select our country, which is United States. And right here is where you get the option to transfer your data to this Mac. Now, what's interesting here is that we do have a setup with iPhone or iPad. So if you want to set up your Mac with your iPhone, you can do that. So we're going to try this out. So we're going to unlock our iPhone right here and set it to the side. And we're going to set up with iPhone or iPad and continue. So it's going to look for nearby devices, and you will be able to pick it up. So you can see it says set up new Mac on your iPhone, and it will show your Apple ID. And then it says hold this iPhone up to your Mac, position the pattern in the circle. So we're going to scan this little circle that we see on our screen, this little blue orb, just like you do with iPhones when you set up iPhones. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And you can see it says continue on your Mac after you scan it. So we're going to set that off to the side. And now we have our accessibility options here. So if you do have any accessibility concerns, you could do that. We're going to do not now. And then we have a software update. So it says it's required to continue. So I'm not so sure that it's required. So I'm just going to do update later instead of continuing. And we're going to go ahead and click on continue here as well. And now you will create your Mac account. So this is where you can select your image that you want. You could also click on the plus. We're going to put in our name really quickly. So we're going to put in my name, and then you'll set a password for the computer. This is not for your Apple ID, just for your computer. And man, the more I click on this trackpad, the more I can tell the difference between this and all the other MacBooks, like the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro. So it's definitely not as good, but that is something that you are going to have to compromise on when you're spending as little as you are on a Neo. And now we'll have to sign into our Apple account. Again, I would have thought that setting it up with an iPhone would have already done all this, but maybe I had an issue with mine. And now we have some settings to make this your new Mac. So you can customize these settings if you would like to, but I find that the default is usually pretty good, and it's what I'd recommend as well. So these are things like your location services, Siri, screen time, the appearance, your wallet, things like that. So we'll go ahead and click on continue. And now we will have the option for Apple Intelligence. So this is for live translation, writing tools, cleanup and photos, and Genmoji and image playground. If you don't want that, any of that at all, you can skip it, but I am going to continue, and I will summarize my notifications. So this is where basically it will take all your notifications and summarize them for you in one bubble. I like having this on for all notifications, but you can pick and choose which one you want. Now, if you got the 512 gig model, the one with Touch ID, the next step will be using Touch ID to input your finger. So we're going to go ahead and click on continue. And now we're just going to place our finger over top of the Touch ID sensor a few times to register our finger. Touch ID is ready. So we'll go ahead and click on continue. And now we have Apple Pay. So if you want to set that up now, you can set up your Apple Pay with your different cards. So I'm just going to choose my Apple card right here. And then you can see we are on the welcome screen. So this is the wallpaper that you get, and you see the new welcome text right there, which is nice. So let's go ahead and click on get started, and then we should be brought to the home screen. As you can see right here, we are on our desktop, and so far everything again feels just like the MacBook Air. So we do have the same brightness as well, which is very impressive, the same 500 nits of peak brightness. Now keep in mind, we do only have, sRGB colors. So we don't have the full P3 wide color gamut like you have on the MacBook Air. So the colors aren't going to look as good on this machine, but most people are probably not going to be able to tell a big difference unless you're doing like video editing and things like that. Now let's go into our system settings, because I am curious about what this came with in terms of software. So it did come with version 26.3 on it. That is the default macOS Tahoe version that you get. And then of course inside, as you can see, we have the Apple A18 Pro chip as the chip and 8 gigabytes of RAM. Now keep in mind that this A18 Pro chip is an iPhone chip, so it is going to be powerful enough to run this Mac. Of course, you'll even be able to edit 4K videos, I'm sure, in Final Cut Pro. It's just not going to be good for sustained, intense, performance. So intense tasks, I should say. So I will be doing a deep dive on the performance of the MacBook Neo compared to like the MacBook Air and even the MacBook Pro. I'll compare it to just to see what you might be missing out on or not missing out on. So stay tuned for those videos. I will leave them linked in the description below. But keep in mind, we will also get 16 hours of battery life on the MacBook Neo, so slightly lower than the MacBook Air, but still it's pretty impressive. We can get 16 hours on this device. So let's go ahead and do some benchmarks. So I do want to run some initial benchmark tests. Of course, we will get a lot more into the full review in another video, but right now I want to run some initial benchmark tests. So we're going to go ahead and install a few benchmarks and also some games and even Final Cut Pro to do some video exporting. Okay, so we're going to do some video editing and exporting here in a moment, but let's start with some simple benchmarks. And we're going to start with a simple Geekbench 6 test. So we have Geekbench 6 pulled up on both of these. We're going to click on run CPU benchmark at the same time and see which one scores higher. Now keep in mind again that we do have 512 gigs on both of these, and also we have 8 gigs of RAM on the Neo, 16 gigs on the MacBook Air. Also keep in mind this is the M4 MacBook Air, not the M5. Now keep in mind that this is the 512 gigabyte variant of the MacBook Neo versus the base model MacBook Air M4, also with 512 gigabytes. Now also the MacBook Neo did score higher than the M1, M2, and M3 MacBook Airs for single core performance. Now it did score lower on the general benchmarks compared to M4 and of course compared to M5 as well, but we'll see what we score here. But I am expecting the MacBook Air to win even in single core here, but let's see how big of a difference it actually is. Okay, so we finished up on the MacBook Air first and we scored a 3716 single core, 15389 multi-core, and you can see the MacBook Neo here scored a 3528, so a couple hundred points less, and then an 8318 multi-core, so much higher multi-core on the MacBook Air, which is expected. But the single core, which is going to be tasks like web browsing and your basic web application, going through those applications, that's mostly what you use single core for. So the scores are pretty similar. Again, MacBook Air M4 is higher, but not by a ton. Now we're going to run a disk speed test to see how fast we can read and write to the SSD. So you can see right here, we're doing a 5 GB gigabyte stress test on both. Let's go ahead and tap on start right here for both and see how we're doing. And again, not a massive difference. I'm surprised, especially with the write speeds, 1591 versus 1276. I mean, you know, the read speeds are obviously a good bit higher here, but the write speeds are not too far behind on the MacBook Neo. And you can see that we have green check marks across the board for most things except for 12K down here, which most people are not going to be doing anything close to that. We can see that we have green check marks across the board and a pretty solid score there, a pretty respectable score compared to the MacBook Air M4. And then before we do the Cinebench test, I do want to run a speedometer 3.1 test. And this is a very important test because this is going to show the performance when web browsing. So you can see it says it's a browser benchmark that measures the responsiveness of web applications. So we're going to start the test on both of these and see the score that we get on the Neo versus the Air. So we finished first on the Neo and we scored a 47.4, and take a look at that. It beats the M4 MacBook Air. That is super impressive. So 47.4 versus 44.5. So if you're mostly web browsing, you're going to have a great time with the MacBook Neo because in some areas it might even be faster than the M4 MacBook Air from 2025. And we're going to run one last benchmark here before doing some video editing, and this is going to be the Cinebench test. This is a very intensive test, and you can see that I'm not even able to use the GPU right here for the MacBook Neo. So since the GPU is not high enough, you know, it doesn't meet the requirements for this test, we have to do a CPU test. So we're just going to do the CPU test on both of these and see what we score. And while we're finishing up on this Cinebench test, the other thing I just wanted to point out is that both of these are fanless. So there's not going to be a fan in the MacBook Air or in the MacBook Neo. So even though these are getting pushed pretty hard for this Geekbench here, or for this Cinebench rather, these things are not making a peep because there's no fan inside. So that's something interesting. Now just feeling these, the MacBook Air absolutely gets more warm than the MacBook Neo. It is significantly hotter than the MacBook Neo. So that is something worth mentioning as well. You know, it just really speaks to the optimization of that A18 Pro chip and how the MacBook Neo was just constructed, because again, this is an all new design built from the ground up. It's not like Apple just used materials from the MacBook Air and made it, you know, into a MacBook Neo. This was completely designed, as you could tell from the keyboard and everything, you know, it was designed from scratch to be a MacBook Neo. So anyways, while we're speaking, we did just finish up on the Cinebench test here. So we scored a 1506 for the CPU on the MacBook Neo and a 3123 on the MacBook Air M4. So significantly higher, more than double the speed for this test here, which is pretty interesting to note. Of course, this was very intensive, and for some reason it's upside down on the MacBook Air, but that is something worth mentioning as well. So even though the Geekbench was better, you know, and the speedometer was better for web browsing, you will see a difference here, and the MacBook Air takes the cake with this CPU multi-threaded performance, which, keep in mind, we do have 10 cores on the MacBook Air, 6 cores on the MacBook Neo. So that is worth mentioning. And now for our final test, we're going to do a video export test here in Final Cut Pro. So I have a 30 gigabyte file in here. So this is a 14.5 minute clip right here, 30 gigabytes, and we are going to export this without it fully, you know, rendering in the background. So we're just going to go straight ahead to Command E, and we're going to make sure our settings are set up right. So yes, this is in 4096 by 2160. You can see down here at the bottom, it shows that the estimated is 68.89 on both of these. So obviously it's going to be much less than that, especially when we go over to our settings right here, and we're going to make sure that the video codec is changed to H.264. So we're going to change it to H.264, and you can see now it's going to be about 8 gigabytes. So we're going to go ahead and to next, and we're going to save this to our, you know, desktop right here, or our documents folder. So we're going to save, and we're going to see which one can export faster. All right, so it looks like the MacBook Air finished in just about 7.5 minutes, and the MacBook Neo is not too far behind. They were definitely closer early on, but we're sitting at around 77% on the MacBook Neo. So let's see what we finish at. And there we go. The MacBook Neo just finished up about 2 minutes behind. So 9 minutes and 29 seconds versus 7 minutes and 26 seconds. So, and again, that was for a 7 gigabyte final file. So the original media was about 30 gigabytes that I put into the timeline. So definitely not, a light project here. Obviously, we didn't have a ton of titles and all that, but still, that was a hefty file. And honestly, I'm pretty impressed with the MacBook Neo. I mean, again, that's an iPhone chip, but it's much more than an iPhone chip, as you can see. So only a couple minutes behind the MacBook Air. And by the way, if you're curious about how the M5 MacBook Air compares to the MacBook Neo, I will have a video comparing the two with very similar tests when I unbox the M5 MacBook Air. So stay tuned for that video, and I will have that link down in the description as well once it's finished. Now, I do also want to try out the camera and the microphones as well, because this is something I know I was curious about, because we do have a 1080p webcam on the Neo, but I just want to see how that compares to something like the M4 MacBook Air, which is going to be the same as the M5 MacBook Air. So let's do a new movie recording now. So we're recording on the MacBook Air and on the MacBook Neo. So I'm trying to see which one looks and sounds better, if there's even a difference at all. So they both look pretty good in the preview right now. I think I actually prefer the MacBook Neo for some reason. But yeah, you guys let me know in a comment down below. Do you like the look of the MacBook Neo or the MacBook Air better, along with the sound? Which sound do you think sounds better? Oh, and I cannot forget, I also need to do a test of the speakers. I want to see how the speakers perform on this MacBook Neo, because again, it's the very first time on a MacBook where we have side-firing speakers. So let's try that out. So we have this turned up to 10 notches. So we had turned this up to 10 notches on both of these. I don't want to do max volume because most people aren't going to listen on max volume. I just want to do a modest volume here and see how these two compare. So you guys tell me which one you think sounds better. Man, I have to be honest, I am very impressed with the speakers on the MacBook Neo. Now, you will have to be mindful of what's on the sides, because at first I had these kind of bunched up against each other and I could only hear out of one speaker. So since they are on the sides, you will have to make sure nothing is, covering one of these speakers. But man, the speakers sound amazing on the MacBook Neo. I was not expecting that. So my first impressions of the MacBook Neo are, wow. I mean, I am very impressed with this machine. I mean, I said on X that I thought the performance was going to be better than people thought, and it was even better than I thought. Like, I went into this knowing that performance was going to be better than what people expected. But man, I didn't expect the speakers to sound this good. I didn't expect the camera to look this good. I didn't expect it to feel so compact and so small, which is actually a benefit, especially when traveling. Like, I don't know, I like that. And also just the small touches, like not only the color and the keyboard, but even this ships with the little color right here when you select things in your Finder as the color of your machine. Like if you go into settings and you go to the color right here, there's even a setting for this Mac, and the text highlight color is for this Mac as well. Folder color and tinted, you can see all of that is really just, just a good complement to the color of the MacBook Neo. So Apple really made this not only a fun machine, like it's really fun, it's really, the pink one can be considered cute for a lot of girls as well. And I don't know, I'm just very impressed with the performance, the looks. This thing, I think, is not only going to be catered to, those students, but also for older people who don't want to spend a lot of money. And older people, especially, 65 plus, like retired, people, they're not going to really be doing any type of video editing or photo editing. They're mainly going to be doing social media, browsing the news application and, maybe watching some YouTube videos or something like that, or burning DVDs. Somebody in the Apple Store said they were going to burn DVDs with this, which one thing to keep in mind also, again, like I said earlier, is that we do have one USB 3 and one USB 2 port on here. So make sure that you charge with the USB 2 ports and use anything that you're transferring data with, like an SSD or anything like that. Make sure you use the USB 3 port for that, because there is a difference in the speeds. So I will absolutely be doing a lot more testing with the MacBook Neo. I'm going to try living with this as well for a few months. I'm actually going to replace my MacBook Pro with the Pro chip inside. So I have the M4 Pro, and also I just got the M5 Pro chip, but I'm going to actually try using the MacBook Neo, the super cheap MacBook Neo, as as my main computer for the foreseeable future for the next few months, just to test and see if it's actually, good enough for me to use. Now, obviously, I'm not going to be doing anything crazy with it, but just as a leisurely device around the house, traveling, things like that, I will bring this with me and report back to you guys. I will have a follow-up review on this, and also comparing it to the MacBook Air, because I've been using the MacBook Air for so many years as that leisurely device, as that travel device when I'm not doing intensive work. But the MacBook Neo, I think, can replace that for literally almost half the price. So what do you guys think about the MacBook Neo? Are you going to pick one up? Are you going to replace a MacBook Air? Are you just going to get it as your first MacBook? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. I'm very curious to see your thoughts on the MacBook Neo, but a lot more content to come on the Neo, so make sure you stay tuned for that. But anyways, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.